Hello Magic players, back again. This is Mills from MTG and we are talking about some budget modern, and today we are going all the way back to 2016 to play some Lantern Control. Now this is kind of one of my favorite decks because it tries to control your opponent from all four stages of the game. So we're going to start with we have things like Abrupt Decay and Ensnaring Bridge to stop our opponent when their things are on the board. Then we have things like Mana Leak to stop our opponent when things are being cast. Then we have things like Inquisition, Kozilek, and Duress for when our opponent's things are in their hand. And ultimately, we have things like Codex Shredder that mill cards to counteract what our opponent's doing before they even draw their own cards. So this is obviously going to probably be the most effective, but we need all those other stages in order to make it effective, in order to make it matter, actually. So it's all four of those kinds of things. It's four different types of controlling, locking down your opponent, and so it's a very interesting and hard deck to play, and I think it's very good. Even in today's meta game is very shooken up, but I think Lantern Control has a shot. Especially with Uro being gone, so it doesn't matter if we mill those cards. So we're going to dive right in. We're going to dive in with the namesake of the deck, which is Lantern of Insight, which says each player reveals the top card of their deck revealed, and then tap, sack it, target player shuffles their library. Now the shuffles their library is a Hail Mary, not a Hail Mary, more of like a oh shit bar, because this is what you need. You need this card on the battlefield for most of the rest of your deck to work. So we have ways to search it out if you don't have it in your starting hand, but usually you want it in your starting hand. We do have another card that works kind of as a mini lantern, which is Mishra's Bauble, which you can tap to sack to look at the top card of target player's library and draw a card later. So this is going to allow you to look at their top card once. But it's very important that you see it constantly for cards like this. Codex Shredder says target player tap, target player mills a card. And this is going to allow us to mill our opponent and control what they're drawing. If they're stuck on, like, if they just keep getting lands and it's revealed that the top card of their deck is a land, then we let it stay. But if the top card of their deck is like a Jace the Mind Sculptor or basically any non-land card of value, then we'll mill it away. And we have several of these. We actually have 4 Codex Shredder, 2 Ghoul Caller Bells, which says each player mills, and quite often we don't actually mind because it doesn't really matter a ton. Then next up, well, at least for us, next up is Pyxis of Pandemonium, which says tap, each player exiles a card. Now, it says a whole thing about sacrificing it to return stuff. You're not going to do that. You're not going to get to that much mana. Well, actually, you might actually get to that much mana because it's such a slow deck. But you don't want to. That's the thing. You don't want to. Next up is Mishra's Bauble. I already talked about it. It's a mini lantern. That I already talked about. Grafdigger's Cage. We're milling our opponents a lot, so we want a Grafdigger's Cage here so that we can make it so our opponent can't cast things from our graveyard, can't grab things from their graveyard. They can't do any of those graveyard shenanigans. Uro might be out of the meta, but Kroxa isn't. Next up is Pirate Spellbomb. You might actually want to upgrade this into a few more. I considered taking out the 2 Sorcerer Spyglasses for 3 more Pirate Spellbombs. And the reason for that is that really you might just need that removal. I really like Pirate Spellbomb because it's flexible, because you can draw a card if you don't need to deal the damage. But with the Blitz deck, the Hammer Time deck, and everything like that, you might just need to have a way to deal 2 damage to a creature, because we don't run any creatures. Anyway, next up is Sorcerer Spyglass. As it enters, look at target opponent's hand and then choose any card name. Activate ability of the Activated abilities of sources with the chosen name cannot be activated unless they're mana abilities. If our opponent reveals a hand and we know what deck they're playing, we can name a card that's not in their hand. Let's say they're playing Heliod and Company, and we know, and we see their hand and they have a bunch of like mana dorks and probably a collected company. We can name Walking Ballista, we can name Heliod, we can name Spike Feeder, we can name any of those things. And so this is a way for us to do that. It also gets past Chalice of the Void because we have a lot of 1 and 0 drops. So our opponent is going to play Chalice of the Void on 1. And so Sorcerer's Spyglass lets us dodge that. And normally I would say, hey, just go for the 1 drop anyway. But in a deck like this, like we needed a budget version anyway. And Pithing Needle isn't. Like it's $2-3. And if I wanted to add that, that would go over budget. Next up, we have Ensnaring Bridge as a one-of, and you'll see why we have so many one-ofs in a moment. But this is creatures with power with power greater than the number of cards in your hand can't attack. And I would love to have this as like a 3-of in the deck, but it's $16, $17. But oh, is this good? So it works perfectly though because of a card called Whir of Invention. But basically, we have so many 0 and 1 drops in our deck anyway that our opponents are not going to be attacking if we land this. Next up is Witchbane Orb, which we can also tutor out. Enter the battlefield, destroy all curses attached to you. Doesn't really matter, but you do have Hexproof, which is very good, especially in main deck. So it's a 1-drop because you won't always need it, but it's something you can definitely grab. Next up are our non-artifact cards. So we have Ancient Stirrings to filter for through 5 cards for a colorless card. This can grab us a land. It can grab us those colored mana sources. Don't get fooled if you actually don't know that rule. Lands are colorless. But also it reveals you could also just grab any of your other artifacts. Next up is Duress. This is not a immediate swap for Thoughtseize. If you have Thoughtseizes and Inquisitions, then go 4 Inquisition, go 3 Thoughtseize. The meta is going to be fast enough right now that you don't want to be losing that much life, and Inquisitions can hit basically anything anyways. But that's what you want to do if you're trying to upgrade this deck. But Duress is very nice because you're just gonna reveal a non-creature card from their hand, like the majority of the time. Inquisition Kozilek can hit those creature cards, and it's also a very good removal card that can go into a deck that's not budget. Abrupt Decay is a way for us to deal with Chalice of the Void in the main board, but also any other pesky, legit any other pesky permanent. It's uncounterable. Mana Leak as a counter spell. It basically reads just counter target spell in a deck like this, especially since we can decide whether or not they get up to that extra 3 mana because we manipulate their deck. Then Whir of Invention, X blue, and triple blue in this deck might be a little difficult, but I worked really hard on the mana base to try to make it possible, and it works wonders. Improvise, artifacts you control have Convoke, so they can tap to add 1 to your mana pool to cast a spell. Search your library for an artifact card with mana cost X or less and put it on the battlefield, shuffle your deck. So if you're trying to grab your Ensnaring Bridge, you can say X equals 4, and your opponent, if they know the deck, might think you're trying to grab Witchbane Orb. But instead of Witchbane Orb, you decide to grab Ensnaring Bridge. So that's just something to keep in mind, that you can fake out your opponent. You can make your opponent think you're grabbing one thing, but grab another. So if they have a counterspell, they might debate using it. Usually this will soak up a counterspell though if they have one. But right now the meta is very aggressive, and I think this is definitely a way to go. Our lands are Botanical Sanctum, the green for Ancient Stirrings, the blue for Mana Leak and Whir. Buried Ruin as a budget way of having Academy Ruins in the deck. If you wanted to go 1 Academy Ruins, if you already have it, then you could add in 2 more colored sources. That could be very good. 4 Glimmer Voids. Beginning of end step, if you control 0 artifacts, sacrifice it. You won't unless they have something that says destroy all artifacts. But it says tap, add 1 of any color. That's very, very, very nice. Island. We need the blue sources. River of Tears, if you need that turn 1 play a discard spell. Now, I'm going to say if it's really important, like you're going against combo deck, then you can Glimmer Void on turn 1. Hopefully you hit your Bauble on turn 1 as well, so you don't have to sacrifice it. But it's not against the rules to Glimmer Void turn 1 to Duress or Inquisition of Kozilek if you're going against something that's a combo deck. River of Tears does hit that turn 1 discard ability because you're able to you're playing it, and then it says if a land's entered this turn, add black instead. And so that means turn 1, play it, tap, and then have a discard spell. Spire of Industry is going to be a way for us to discard and have a it's gonna give us any color we need. Mishra's Bauble is really important if you're trying to discard them on turn 1, but I'm going to be honest, if you're trying to hit that discard spell on turn 1 100% of your games, then maybe max out on River of Tears and go down on your Buried Ruins. But really quite often in this deck you don't need it on turn 1. Next up we have Welding Jar as a 0-drop to protect our artifacts. We have Nile Spellbomb for graveyard hate. We have Golgari Charm for enchantment hate and tiny creature hate. It can act as a mini board wipe with the -1/-1 counters. We have Wilt for artifact enchantment hate that dodges Chalice of the Void, and we have Leyline of Sanctity to prevent them from making us discard cards, but also to protect us from burn spells, from storm, from anything like that. Anyway, that's the deck. It's a very, very slow deck, but it drags your opponent down with you. It's a very hard deck to play, and I only have about 10 to 15 minutes each video to explain these decks. So really, if you liked the deck and want to hear more about it, let me know below. I'll answer any questions you have. But if you like the deck, if you have any ideas that were left out of the deck or any cool utility artifacts you could add, please let me know below because I'm always down to hear new ideas. And also, if you want to see more content like this, please hit that subscribe, hit that like button, let me know that you're liking this content, and I will see you next time.